And she says, right, stand up, face slightly apart, hands by your side, close your eyes. And she says, I'm going to send you a ball of energy. So I'm thinking, well, if I've got my eyes shut, I can't catch it.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to another edition of Soul Explorers with your host, Sally Taylor. I'm Gary Langley, and today we have a special guest, Bill Raine from the UK. Bill has a book called The Awakening. He's here to tell us his story today. Welcome to Soul Explorers, Bill.
Thank you very much, Gary and Sally, and a very happy new year to you.
Oh, same to you. And we're so happy to have you with us, Bill. Could you start off with just telling us a little bit of your background story that led you to your current spiritual path?
So I live in the UK, in the northern part of England, in Durham, or just east of Durham, 2 miles off the North Sea. And when my journey started, it was rather under tragic circumstances. My youngest son, Robert, his wife was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 41. And from diagnosis to passing was 3 short months. And she left our Rob to look after the 2 little ones. They were both under 4 years of age, 2 boys. And it was absolutely devastating. They'd been married 13 years. They'd gone through IVF and stuff like that. But over the years, we had bonded very closely as a family. So she was more like a daughter to me than a daughter-in-law. Her and my wife, Maureen, they got on like a house on fire. They worked very closely together with the children before she passed. And then we took on the responsibility of looking after the 2 little ones while our Robert went to work, which he had to do to keep a roof over their heads. And it was so near to Christmas that Christmas was really just a blur. And I raged inside that why would they take someone so young who really had a life to look forward to with 2 little ones? And it was so tragic. But I did rage. I raged against the world. I raged against God. Why not me? And then we got through Christmas. I don't know how we did it, but we did. Life goes on. You get up each day and it's the first thing you think about in the morning. The last thing you think about at night. Brings a lot of emotion back, but nevertheless, it happened. And I've got to live with it. We live with it now. It's not that much easier when you talk about it, but time goes on. In February, well, it was actually early January of 2019, I opened my phone and I joined Facebook as they did, and WhatsApp and Messenger and things like that. And I opened the phone up and there was this advert came up for the Horden Spiritualist Friendship Centre. And it was for an open circle on a Wednesday night. The following week, Wednesday night, opened the phone because I had a message from old Christopher. And the first thing that came up was an advert for this open circle, Horden Spiritualist Friendship Centre. And I thought, well, I never clicked to see I liked it or anything like that. Why does this keep coming up? And I just sort of dismissed it, as you do, because I wasn't really interested. Never even thought about spiritualism or anything like that. I knew what they did after a fashion. My mum was a little bit psychic and did, she had her tea leaves read and stuff like that, but that's another story entirely. And then the third time this advert came up again, I'd finished the sort of evening meal and went to text our up to see how he's getting on. And this advert came up again, and it was just something my mind just said, go. And I said to Maureen, the wife, I just said, Maureen, I'm going down to see what it's all about. So I went down and sat in this sort of square, the way the chairs were arranged, and trainee mediums and other, mediums further on would get up and give a message. So I'd just sit in the back corner and never said anything to anybody. They asked us, like, who's new? And I sort of put my hand up, like a couple of others did. And they asked us why I came. And I said, I don't know. I said, I just saw the advert and something said, come down. This was afterwards, because I couldn't answer them when they asked us the direct question, because I am rather shy in a way, and I keep myself to myself. And I couldn't answer at that time. But afterwards, there was a cup of tea and that, and they invited us in to have a cup of tea and a biscuit and a bit chat. And it came out, well, I just had this sign. And then they said, oh, well, we have a divine service on a Sunday. Different medium each week, come down, see what happens. And you might get a message. So I started going on a Wednesday and a Sunday. And I didn't get any messages. And then one Wednesday night, it was only about 5 weeks after, the medium who runs the centre, Raine Wilson, she says, I've got a message for you. And I thought, oh, I'm going to hear something here. And she just said, you've got to pack all your troubles into a box and lock it. And she says, once you do that, you'll get a key that will open many doors for you. And there was nothing from anybody who had passed. And my mum had quite a large family, and nobody else come through. That was all she said. And then 2 weeks after that, she asked us to join the development circle on a Saturday morning. And that's what I did. And I joined the development circle on a Saturday morning. And that was like fireworks and thunder and lightning and terrifying and all at the same time. It was strange sitting in a circle with sort of 8 or 9 women and me, and I didn't know them from Adam. And they play this weird music and in your meditation, for 15 minutes. And then they say, oh, have you got a message for anybody in the circle? Have you got a message for the whole circle? And nothing. Did you say anything? No, just black. And there was a couple of times I felt a giggle coming on, because when I'm nervous, I always giggle. After the session was over, Irene took us to one side and she says, you're a funny one, aren't you? And I says, what do you mean? She says, I know what you were doing. Just like that. And I said, yes. I says, it's nerves, Irene. That's what it is. And anyway, over a few weeks, things started to develop. I started to see eyes, but they were only in black and white. So you'd be sitting with your eyes closed, the music would be playing, and then all of a sudden this eye would just travel across, as if somebody was turned to look at us with one eye and just go past my vision like that.
You were seeing it in your mind's eye?
Seeing it in my mind's eye.
Yeah.
You're sitting with your eyes closed, feet on
Right.
the floor,
Right.
just like on a dining chair. And I thought, this is weird, this. And I was always seemed to be the last one to come back. That was the problem. People would come back just before the music stopped, because you tell your guide, and I didn't know what a guide was, but they said, oh, just say to your guide 15 minutes and they'll bring you back. So I was saying 15 minutes, but no, nobody woke me up. The first thing I got was as if a stone had been thrown into water, and I heard a splash. And I asked Irene about it later, and she says, well, she says, everybody else was back but you. She says, so I just take a pebble and I throw it in the pond, and it usually brings you back. And I thought, oh, hey, you know, this is weird, this. But then the eyes started going to colour, and I started to see colours. I started to, if you like, as if I was flying, like going through clouds and things like that, weightless. I suppose what a bird would do, you know, or what a bird may feel as it's flying, but there was no sense of flapping wings. It just seemed to be floating through the clouds and seeing sort of different villages and trees and that at the bottom. And then there was a young girl came, new to the group, but they all knew her. At the time, I didn't know that her mother was a medium. But anyway, she sat next to the door, which was actually straight opposite me in this circle. And we went into meditation. I started to see this colour. It was like a pale mauve colour. And then I just got the vision of the circle, as if I had my eyes open. And there was a young girl standing next to this young girl that had just started. She wasn't there. So anyway, when the circle came out and we were recounting what had happened, I said to Irene, Irene, I saw a girl standing next to that girl across from me. And I says, it looked like her, but the hair was longer. And the face was just that wee bit different. The girl says, oh, I know who that was. She says, that's my twin sister. She says, I was born a twin, but my twin died at birth. And she's one of my guides. Well, he could have knocked me down with a feather.
It just
Bill.
gave me chills, Bill.
Bill, I'm wondering at this point in the development with your circle, had you received a communication at that time from your daughter-in-law?
No, nothing at all. The first time actually was one Sunday. They had some of the mediums that were more or less preparing for platform work this Sunday night, and they had a young girl called Jane Bennett, and she came to me and the wife on this Sunday evening, and our Robert had actually come down with us. Our Christopher looked after the two beds, and I'd managed to get our Robert to come down. And anyway, we were sitting, and Jane sort of came to me, and she said, I've got a young lady here, and her name begins with a C. And she said she passed quite quickly. And I'd never said anything to anyone. I'd lost my daughter-in-law. That's as much as what they knew. And they knew she was Catherine. So I thought, oh, well, we'll see where this goes to. So I says, yes. She says, do you know who it is? And I says, yes. And she says, I take it that's your son that's sitting next to your wife. And I says, yes, it is. She says, right. She says, I need to come to you. She says, I was a little bit confused because you both got the same names. Well, I got called Bill and he gets called Rob. So, but we both called Robert William. So, yes, we both have the same names. But she didn't know that at the time. Neither did anybody else. She says, what she's telling me is that you got your wish, you've gotten your car, but I didn't get my trip to Australia. And our Robert just tears. And I didn't know she wanted to go to Australia. And I'd known her nearly 20 years. But he changed his car and he'd getting a BMW, which he'd always wanted. And she was saying, no. But anyway, he'd bought himself a BMW. And then she said, and no Nerf guns in the house. And then she said, she's given me a red rose. And that's what you put in her coffin before they put the lid on. And none of us knew that. There was only our Robert. And he'd gone up on the morning of the funeral to see her for the last time. And he put a single red rose in her coffin. And that just blew him away, as did the wife, of course. I just felt as if I was in shock. But yes, that's when a lot of emotion was released that time.
So at this point, Bill, you're realizing, wait a minute, this is real.
Yes.
Because
yes.
you got evidence that nobody knew.
Nobody knew. There was only our Robert and the Undertakers. And that was it.
It sounds to me, Bill, like you're probably very naturally sensitive anyway. One of the things I noticed when I was reading your book is that your emotions are very on the surface. And I love that you're so open with sharing your emotional state. And I find that to be true with a lot of people who are also more sensitive in other ways. Did you have any experiences before this development that you've been undergoing for the last several years beforehand, or did you have a belief system in the afterlife?
It wasn't really till this started, Sally, that you track back in your mind of things that you thought was a coincidence, that remind you of past things. And then things did progress in the development circle, to the extent where, a couple of times I actually stood up in the development circle, give a short message off. The first one was a woman who had passed. But the thing they wanted us to concentrate on was the flowers that was in the hearse. That there was red roses and white roses, but there was these other yellow flowers with a black centre, like a sunflower, but smaller. And I didn't know what they called them, and they couldn't tell me what they were. But I said they were special flowers from someone special, and they didn't tell us who it was. And because you haven't got the confidence to start with, and because I'm an empath, I do sense people's pain, if you like. And I've always known that there seemed to be this sensitivity to other people's, how they're feeling, their feelings at an instant in time. Even if it's anger, you can you can pick it up without them really seeing the signs of putting fists up or anything like that, or even looking in their eyes for that. You just get that sensation as if, whoa, there's something there. But it's only since I really started the trance channeling, which developed from the development circle, but not with the church. There was a lady came one Wednesday night, and it was what they called a trance demonstration. And I thought, trance demonstration, what's that? I'll go down. But it had on, you could take photographs. So, of course, I took the camera down, but I also took the video camera down. And anyway, it was a woman called Freda Robson. Never heard of her before in my life. I didn't even know where she lived. They just said, oh, it's Freda Robson. And she sat down, and they'd put a chair out for her, and this screen sort of round the back, which I'd actually repaired for them. But this screen behind her, and she had this this sort of table lamp with a red bulb in, and one on the other side with a blue bulb in. And both the lights were on, and they put the lights out in the church. But you could see what was happening, sort of thing, in a way. But it was sort of dim. But you had this blue light and this red light, and she went into trance basically. But the first thing she said was she called out a person by name. She was looking for this person with this name. I think it was Louise, the first one. Is Louise here? I need to speak to Louise. And anyway, she had to ask 2 or 3 times. In fact, Louise put her hand up. And anyway, Louise got a message. She went to this old man, Mr. Robinson, and she said, I've got your wife. And then she said, I've got somebody else as well who should have been your wife. And it turned out that he was Church of England, and this girlfriend that he had was Roman Catholic. and they were very much in love, and they decided that they wanted to get married. So he went to ask father-in-law for a hand in marriage. And when he went to the door, the father came to the door and told him, get yourself away and don't ever darken this door again. And he said, and you needn't try and say anything to her, because I don't want you to speak to her again neither. Then she says, you go to the cemetery every day. And she says, she's telling me that you kneel down at the grave and you're too damn old and you struggle to get up because you go on your little electric scooter. And he says, yes, I do. And yes, I do struggle. And she says, you shouldn't go out in the dark and in the rain. She says, because I've got to go out and watch you. And she told him a few things that had happened at the cemetery that morning. She says, what I need to tell you and what she's telling me to tell you is these words. And she gave these few words out, and he wept. He says, Freda, he says, I waited 35 years for a medium to tell me that. The last words that he spoke to his wife as she passed. And that's who I work with now, Freda Upson.
Right. And she's kind of this primary character in your book, where you talk about your development of your own trance ability. And so describe to me, I know it came on relatively quickly for you. Describe to me how you experience that. Are you in a deep trance where you don't know what's going on? Do you keep memory of what you're experiencing at the time? How does that work for you?
To be honest, Sally, it varies. If I just say this, that the very first time, I mean, Freda did come back 3 weeks later and she did a divine service. And by that time, I'd actually been taken over twice in the development circle. The first time was basically instant unconsciousness, but I knew that something caused it. All I can say is I was sitting in the circle, we'd done our meditation, and it was relatively early in my progression. I had been saying things, but at that time, apart from the message to the young lady, I'd never give anything else off. And Irene said to her, she says, I've anything for the circle, Bill, or anything for anybody in the circle? And I said, no, I never got anything, Irene. I was basically traveling a wee bit, like I usually do. Sometimes I'm sitting at the bottom, like, of a pond or the ocean, and just like watching things go by. These little sort of, you could see like seahorses and little fish and things like that. But sometimes you get what looks like an angel with wings, sort of like just floating along, and little sort of orbs, if you like, like just shapes of like energy, but they're always brilliant white, and they just sort of go across in your vision. But it's so peaceful and so relaxed, and the seaweed's just gently moving, and the bits of the sea and enemies on the rocks and things like that.
So, Bill, it sounds like at this time they were working on your development. You weren't getting a lot of messages, but you were having experiences. Would you say that was the case?
Yes, definitely, Gary. They had introduced me to my guide. That was one thing that had happened, and they called him Albert. That was quite interesting. Again, sitting in the circle and after the meditation, and you hadn't gotten anything. And Irene said, I'd actually seen Irene's face like in the top right-hand corner of my vision while I was in meditation. And I'd sort of turned my head and looked up, and I thought, what are you doing here? It's my meditation, and go away. And she disappeared. And she says, Bill, you get anything? And I says, no. I says, I saw you looking in. I'm sure I did. And she says, well, I look in everybody to see where you're at. She says, but most of the time, I never know where you're at. She says, but my guide said to me, he was talking to your guide, And your guide was saying, he's asking me to give him something for the circle and something, for somebody in the circle. He doesn't even know my name. And I said, well, I don't. And she says, well, do you want to meet your guide? And I thought, this is going to be fun. Wasn't looking forward to it at all, actually. But I said, yes, it's at least a step forward. You know who you can talk to, if you like, or try to talk to. And I still wasn't getting a lot. And she says, right, stand up, face slightly apart, hands by your side, close your eyes. And she says, I'm going to send you a ball of energy. So I'm thinking, well, if I've got my eyes shut, I can't catch it. But anyway, she just said, breathe normally as if you're going into your meditation. Well, you sort of take 3 or 4 deep breaths and exhale slowly in. So that's what I did. And then all of a sudden there's this, like, you can say it was an orb with teeth. It was like a lightning ball, but it was like a ball within a ball, and they seemed to be contra-rotating, and these things shooting out of it, and it was like there, right in front of my eyes, and it was like, whoa, what's that? And there was no sound at all. I couldn't hear anything. Whether they'd shut my ears off or what, I don't know. I couldn't hear a thing. And there was just this thing rotating in front of my face. And I thought, where's that going to go? And I'm aware that I'm breathing, and I'm thinking, is it going to go up my nose? If I open my mouth, is it going in my mouth? What's happening here? And then it just seemed as if they did something that like calmed your nerves, like just everything seemed to shut down. And then it was just like a pair of curtains opened at the theatre. The ball disappeared, and there was this really heavy sea in front of me, and I was like above it, like you're at the pictures and you see the screen, and you don't see the front of the ship, you just see this heavy sea with these big waves and curlers on the top and white foam, and you can hear the wind howling. And then Irene said, what can you see? And it was just like these words were coming out. I can see this, I can see these big seas. Well, are you on a ship? And then I looked down a little bit, and there's the front of this prow of this boat, and you can see this big black thing, which was like where the hold was, with this tarpaulin over and these buttons on and that. The mast in front. You look up at the mast, it's not carrying any sails. There's no sail on it, just a pennant. And the pennant's like about 30 degrees pointing backwards, and it's quite a long one, but it's more or less straight out and just flapping at the back. So, it's really windy. And the boat's going up and down and sideways like this. And she says, how many people's on the boat? Well, no, she didn't. She asked us first, who are you? Are you the captain? And I just said, no, I'm the steersman. And then it was how many souls, how many people's on board. And there was 4 on the left-hand side, near the front of the ship, 3 on the other side, me, 1 behind me. I think it was 9 souls in total. And she says, has the ship got a name? And it came up Hermes. So I just said Hermes. And she said, can you describe yourself? And I just sort of looked down, and you've got these fancy leathers, like trousers on that's got cross stitching up the sides, and these sort of leather sandals and woolly socks, and this leather jacket. Have you got anything in your hand? And there's like this woven leather sort of button with these leather things hanging down with like knots in. You get the impression that the guy's about 55, 58-year-old. He's sort of heavy duty. His left leg's aching like mad. And you're sort of thinking, well, why is your leg aching? And it was broken in his younger days, and he always has problems with it when it's cold and wet and, the boat's dancing about. She said, is there anything else on the boat? And there was this eye on the port side, because of the way it was shaped. It was like an Egyptian eye, you know, it's sort of down and it has this like eyebrow on it. And then there was this particular wave just seemed to come towards us, and it was absolutely huge. And the sort of boat went up, and then it just down the other side, and there was another wave behind that one, and the prow just buried in, and then it went black. I heard this voice in the distance, "You can come back now," and like saying, "Come on, it's okay, you can come back." And I opened my eyes, and the tears were running down my cheeks. And I had the feeling that I'd lost my crew. Everybody had perished. And she said, "Did you not feel the pain in your chest?" And I said, "No." And she says, "Well, he died of a heart attack at the wheel. And the ship in 1780. And 1780 didn't seem right to me. I just thought, that's not right. I'm trying to think of the port because it's an ancient Greek port. And I got the impression of 780 rather than 1780. And Heraclean was the port. The Hermes was the ship. And it was actually 780 BC. That was how I met Albert.
Albert. Okay.
That's my guide.
Well, that's interesting. So Albert was the gentleman that was at the helm of the ship. Yes. And so it sounds like you experienced that as if you were him.
I was on that ship, but I seemed to be behind him and slightly above him.
Okay.
As if I was viewing it.
Right.
But when Irene asked the questions, it was as if I was him. So I was looking from his eyes at the ship, at what I was wearing. And it was a wooden ship, you know, a single mast, the wheel slightly raised at the back. It actually had a wheel, that was the thing that probably she saw as being 1780, well, I saw it as sort of 780 by the time that wheels had been used to steer the ship rather than an oar, you know, out the side at the back.
Right.
So that's how I met Albert. And I've never ever spoke to him since.
Really?
No, never spoke to him. I've asked him and he never comes. He sits in the background. And apparently he likes a glass of sort of whatever, short stuff. But he's the one that prefers to sit at the bar on his own, quietly hugging his glass. And that's what he does. But when he's there, when I need him, he's there, but he never says anything. And my guide, since I wrote the book, I might as well say the parrot on my shoulder is a guy called Tootsie. And I'm following his journey. Or should I say, he's on a journey of learning, and as I am, and we on this journey together. And what he gets told, he tells us as much as he can. There's some things he won't tell us, or said, "No, I can't tell you that." Sometimes he'll slip something in and say, "Well, I can tell you this, but I shouldn't really." And he's been with us for the last sort of 4 years.
This is very common. I think our main guide often doesn't talk to us that much. They're more observing, maybe planning suggestions, but they really have a policy of non-interference in the way we live our life. But other entities may come, like in your experience, to work with you, and that is their purpose, their goal. But our main guides are often very quiet in the background.
Right. Yes. Well, my chief guide, if you like, the one that comes with authority, shall we say, is a guy called John O'Thorne. And Tootsie complains about him sometimes because he's always there. But Tootsie says he folds his arms and he's standing behind watching. We've never had him sit down, but sometimes, I think twice, possibly 3 times he's been through in the 5 years. And it's always been something like a serious lesson to learn or a serious bit of information to give us as guidance. Where Tootsie, straight away, because he comes in with a laugh. If you give him a chance, he's there. And he's in, and yeah, the rest's usually a riot. But his ways have been curbed over the 4 years. So where he used to come in and he wanted to dance and carry on and have a laugh and crack jokes and things like that, as well as giving you very deep information about how things were, how he passed, who took him onto the other side, which was his mother. He told us it happened late at night. He told us who he was. And his name's actually Toots Shaw. And he had a restaurant in New York City. And he passed, I think, in 1970, somewhere about that. Close to midnight in hospital. And he said he was a jack the lad. He used to do a bit of sort of smuggling during Prohibition and stuff like that. He thought he was a right jack the lad. He didn't know that he had compassion until he got onto the other side.
Isn't it interesting how they retain their personalities, though? And it sounds like he very much has retained personality, at least in the way that he comes through for you.
Yes, he has. In the early days, he didn't think that much of women, to be honest. He seemed to sort of dismiss them a bit. But it was Freda and Irene Hartail, whose house we met in when I started sitting with Freda. It was Irene and Freda that called him Tootsie. They were thinking of like top hat and tails in sort of 20s, the 30s. All this dancing and that, and laughing and carrying on. And they mentioned Zoom. I didn't even know what Zoom was. Never heard of it before. Didn't come up to 2.5 years later, and then you find Wendy Zammett's site and it's on Zoom, and yet Zoom was mentioned that long ago.
Which, by the way, is how we have come to know you, Bill.
That's right.
Through the Zamet's group, yes. Which is a wonderful resource for anybody looking for information on the afterlife. I always like to put that plug in for them.
Bill, let me ask you. So you've sort of had this awakening into the fact that there is a greater reality, that we do continue on after physical death. You're having experiences. Where would you say you are now with those experiences?
This is the view I have at present. It's not a definitive view, but I think every one of us is on a journey. And that journey is undertaken alone. There's only you can take that journey. Nobody can do it for you. But each of us contribute pieces in this huge jigsaw puzzle. And our jigsaw pieces are different from somebody else's jigsaw pieces. And we tend to believe implicitly in our jigsaw pieces and not the ones that other people are getting. But what we need to understand is that our own individual jigsaw pieces are only part of this huge picture. And that picture is the picture of everything. And we all linked. We all absolutely inextricably linked together. And that's my impression of the energy of everything. And we all are a part of that energy of everything. And we can all communicate with each other from the lowest to the highest. But we are, in a way, restricted somewhat to where we are on the journey from a beginning to eternity. And there's all that knowledge which each one of us has access to.
Well, Bill, we really want to thank you for coming and sharing some of your story today. The book is called The Awakening, by Bill Raine. Do you have a co-author on that?
No, Robert W. Raine.
Rob,
No, Robert.
I know you as Bill, so
Yes.
Robert W. Raine, Raine is how you spell his last name. Thanks for sharing your story. It's been a pleasure, and Happy New Year to you.
And to you.
Yes, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. It has been fascinating, and I wish you the best on your continued spiritual journey.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.